Hello. I used to think I had it all figured out, a steady career producing audiobooks, a wife who turned heads, and what looked like the perfect life. But then everything went quiet. I'm talking complete silence for weeks, not a single word from her. And when the truth finally came out, it hit me hard. She'd had a relationship with her boss, and what shocked me even more was the secret she'd kept about kids for 16 long years. At that moment, I was left with two choices: fall apart or stand my ground. What do you do when the woman you trusted completely lets you down in ways you never expected? My name's Gavin Whitaker. I'm 40 now, and up until about 4 months ago, I thought I had a pretty solid understanding of what my marriage stood on. 16 years with the same person builds a kind of certainty. You get used to the structure, like knowing every room in a house you helped build. But then out of nowhere, you realize it was all a fragile setup, more like a house of cards. I run a small audiobook production company out in Seattle. Every day, voice actors pass through my doors, lending emotion and personality to stories written by other people. Funny, isn't it? Surrounded by all those voices, and I couldn't hear what was happening in my own life. Between coordinating voice talents, syncing up with publishers, managing engineers, and trying to keep up with all the latest changes in audio tech, I didn't notice the biggest shift happening right under my own roof. "Morning," I said, sliding a fresh cup of coffee toward Lauren across the kitchen island that Wednesday in May. She was already dressed sharp for work, sleek slacks and a fitted blazer, while I stood there in my usual faded jeans and an old t-shirt. Working in a sound booth all day with creative folks makes comfort more of a priority than style. She didn't even glance up, just took the cup, sipped, and kept her eyes glued to her phone, scrolling like I wasn't even there. I figured maybe she was just overwhelmed. The company she worked for, a pharmaceutical firm, was wrapping up a huge clinical trial. As a senior data analyst, she carried a serious load. "Big day today with those results?" I asked, trying again. Still nothing. Not a flicker. Just the quiet tapping of her nails against the screen. I told myself she was just zoned in. We all get like that sometimes, right? But then it happened again at dinner. And before bed. And the next morning. By day 4 of this silence, it was clear something was off. Really off. This wasn't just the absence of conversation. There was something else in the air, cold, distant, and intentional. Trying to keep calm, I did what any husband would. I walked into her home office and gently rested my hand on her shoulder while she organized papers. "Lauren, did I do something wrong?" She brushed my hand off like it burned and walked to the far side of the room. That's when the chill hit me straight in the gut. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was my wife, my partner of 16 years, methodically shutting me out of her life one silent moment at a time. Days slipped into weeks, and the quiet became routine. I tried everything, brought home her favorite takeout, left little notes by her bed, even booked a weekend trip to the coast where we'd honeymooned. But nothing pierced that invisible barrier she'd thrown up. Over beers one night at Doyle's, a dim little bar we'd been hitting since college, my friend Derek laid it out. "Maybe she's seeing someone," he said, dead serious. I nearly coughed up my IPA. "Lauren? No chance." I'd thought about it, sure. But hearing someone else say it made my chest tighten. "Then what else explains it?" Derek asked. "People don't just stop talking to their spouse out of nowhere." He signaled the bartender for another round. "Anything else changed?" I ran a hand through my hair, feeling again how the gray had crept in at the edges. "She did get promoted. She's running the whole research department now. Long hours, more stress." "Promotions don't make people go silent," Derek said, giving me a look that meant business. "Gavin, I love you like a brother, but you've always been a little blind when it comes to Lauren." Then he brought up Mason, my old business partner, and at one point, my best friend. We built the audiobook studio from the ground up, but things fell apart fast, mostly due to Lauren's influence. I ended up with the company. He walked away with a broken friendship and a bitter severance deal. "That was different," I said. "Mason was careless. He started making decisions behind my back." "That's what she told you," Derek said, his voice dropping. "But did you ever ask his side?" I didn't want to go down that road, so I changed the topic. Later that night, I found Lauren at her desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and glowing monitor light. She looked locked in, cold blue light reflecting off her face as she scrolled through graphs and charts. I stood at the doorway and finally said, "We need to talk." She didn't even flinch. Just kept typing. "This can't go on, Lauren. Whatever it is, whatever I did, we can work through it. But this silence? It's tearing us apart." I walked closer and gently turned her chair so she was facing me. For the first time in weeks, Our eyes met, and what I saw sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't hate. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was nothing. Just a hollow space where warmth used to be. Do you even hear me anymore? My voice cracked a little, and I hated that it did. She let out a long sigh, like I was a minor inconvenience interrupting her schedule. I hear you, Gavin. I'm just busy. That was it. 18 days of silence, and those were the first words she said to me. Cold. Robotic. Like she was talking to a stranger who had no business being in her space. Busy for 3 weeks straight? Too busy to even acknowledge your husband's existence? I tried to keep my voice calm, but it was a struggle. She didn't even flinch. Just turned back to her computer. I don't have time for dramatics, she said flatly. This trial could impact millions of lives. And what about our life? Does that not matter anymore? I asked. Nothing. No response. Just the clicking of her keys as if that closed the matter for her. I stood there, feeling invisible, while the weight of it all settled in. My wife hadn't spoken to me in weeks, and it felt like there was nothing I could do to change that. The real question was, how long was I willing to keep living like this, like a ghost in my own home? 3 more weeks passed. 21 more days of silence, of sleeping next to someone who acted like I didn't exist. I was hanging by a thread, worn thinner than the soles on my old recording booth slippers. Then came that Saturday morning. I watched Lauren in the mirror as she carefully applied her makeup. She was heading out to meet a colleague, looking polished and detached as ever. That's when it hit me. I couldn't keep doing this. I needed space. Time to think. Time to breathe. I'm going for a drive, I told her, not really expecting her to answer. But this time, she did glance up. Fine, she said, her tone flat and lifeless. The word just hung there in the air like a bad smell. I grabbed my keys and my old leather jacket and paused at the bedroom door. Will you be here when I get back? She didn't even look up this time. Just kept working on her lashes. I have meetings all day, she said. On a Saturday? The trial doesn't care what day it is, Gavin. I stood there a moment longer, looking at this woman who had once been my whole world. There were new creases near her eyes that no amount of makeup could fully hide. A tension in her face that hadn't always been there. Sure, we were both getting older. But this was different. Something inside her had shifted. You know, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. Marriage needs words to survive. Silence is just a slow funeral. She put the mascara wand down carefully. Maybe some things are better left unsaid. The most she'd spoken to me in weeks, and somehow, that felt colder than all the silence combined. I walked out. My boots echoed against the hardwood as I left the house we'd built together. I fired up my rider, my one indulgence, the thing Lauren had always disapproved of, and let the engine's growl rattle through me. It was honest, at least. More honest than anything I'd heard in that house lately. I rode aimlessly, letting the spring air clear my head. Eventually, I found myself outside Derek's apartment. He opened the door in gym shorts and a faded tee, blinking in surprise. Gavin? It's not even noon on a Saturday. Everything okay? I just needed to get out, I muttered, running a hand through my windblown hair. Mind if I crash for a bit? Derek stepped aside. Mi casa es su casa. Beer's in the fridge. I passed on the beer, but accepted the coffee he offered. I was just taking the first sip when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Gavin Whitaker? The audiobook guy? It's Mason. We need to talk. It's about Lauren. I froze. Mason. After 7 years of silence, hearing from him felt like a ghost reaching out from the past. And he wanted to talk about Lauren? Derek noticed my face. Who's that? I showed him the message. Mason, he said, eyebrows raised. Well, the plot thickens. Another buzz. Please, Gavin. It's important. Doyle's at 1:30 p.m. You gonna meet him? Derek asked. I think I have to, I said quietly, already typing out a reply. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a back booth at Doyle's, nursing a seltzer and watching the door. It had been years, but when Mason walked in, I recognized him instantly. He looked older. Sure, a hairline had crept back, and gray brushed his temples, but he still had that confident stride. Gavin, he said, reaching out a hand. After a beat, I shook it. Thanks for coming, he said. Your message got my attention, I replied, studying his face. All the bad blood between us felt distant now. Small. He ordered a beer, then turned to me, serious. I've been thinking about reaching out for months, he said. But after I saw Lauren with him again last week, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. My mouth went dry. Him? Colin Barrett, Mason said. VP of Clinical Research at Metatronics. The name hit me like a punch to the ribs. Colin Barrett, Lauren's new boss. The guy she was always having meetings with on weekends. How long? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Mason's expression shifted, compassion, pity, something close to regret. 5 months, at least. That's what I've heard, Mason said. My sister works in HR at Metatronics. They haven't exactly been low-key, Gavin. That hit like a brick. My whole body felt numb. Why now? I asked, trying to make sense of it. Why are you telling me this? Last I heard, we weren't even on speaking terms. He rubbed his face like the words pained him. That was Lauren, he said. She turned you against me. Told you I was stealing from our business, remember? But the real reason she wanted me gone was because I knew too much. About her past. I raised an eyebrow. What past? The kids, he said quietly. She had 2 kids in her early 20s. Gave them up for adoption. I nearly choked on my drink. What? And 2 pregnancies that ended early, he added. She never told you, did she? That's why she didn't want kids with you. It wasn't about her career. It was about history. My whole world tilted. 16 years of marriage, and I was just now learning I'd been living with a stranger. I sat there at Doyle's long after Mason left, staring at my empty glass like it could give me answers. Lauren had been through 4 pregnancies before me, 2 resulted in adoptions, and 2 ended unexpectedly. And all these years she'd told me kids weren't for us, kept saying it was a mutual decision. But it had never been mutual. It had been hidden. You good to drive? The bartender asked, snapping me out of it. I nodded, tossed some bills on the table, and walked out into a world that looked too normal for how much mine had just crumbled. The sun was shining, the breeze was soft, but everything inside me felt broken. I fired up my rider, unsure where to go, but my gut led me home. Something in me had shifted. I was done playing nice. It was time for answers. As I rolled into the driveway, I saw a car that didn't belong there. In BMW. Lauren's spot was empty. I peeked through the bay window, and there she was, sitting on the couch in our living room. Laughing. With Colin Barrett. Not at work. Not in a meeting. In our home. On our couch. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. I'd spent weeks blaming myself, walking on eggshells, thinking maybe I was the problem. Turns out, she'd just been waiting for me to stay out of the way. I slipped in through the side door. Their voices carried down the hallway like a bad dream. He's clueless, Lauren said, chuckling. Still trying to make things right, like he doesn't realize it's already too late. How much longer are you going to keep this up? Colin asked. His voice smooth, a little smug. The silent treatment works, she said. Besides, I need to lock in my position before the divorce. That prenup has a fidelity clause. Divorce. The word sliced through me. Not because I thought we had a chance, but because it confirmed what I'd feared. She wasn't just distant. She was done. She was calculating, planning, playing me. I stepped into the living room, and just like that, the air shifted. Their conversation stopped mid-sentence. Lauren jumped to her feet like she'd seen a ghost. Her face went pale, then settled into something neutral. Gavin, she said, trying to keep it calm. I thought you were out. Clearly, I said. My voice flat. Hello, Colin. Hope the scotch is good. Colin set down the glass like it burned his hand. It was a gift from my parents. Part of our wedding set. Gavin, this isn't what it looks like. Lauren started, slipping into her polished voice, the one she used to sell ideas in boardrooms. No. I leaned on the doorframe, crossed my arms. Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you're having drinks with someone new in my house, enjoying my scotch, while discussing ways around the prenup. Then I turned to Colin. Did she tell you about the kids she had before we met? Or are you in for some surprises down the line? Lauren's face went ghost white. How did you? Mason, I said. Turns out he wasn't a thief. Just knew too much. Colin looked like he'd been smacked with a brick. What kids? He asked, eyes bouncing between us. I let out a bitter laugh. Ask your girlfriend. She's got a talent for explaining things. Real smooth talker. I walked past them, headed straight to the bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing. Lauren followed me in, shutting the door behind her. You had no right to air my private business, she hissed. All the sugar gone from her tone. Just venom now. Those pregnancies were before I met you. They're not your concern. I kept folding clothes, calm as I could. 16 years, Lauren. And I had to hear that from the man you spent years painting as a criminal. I zipped the bag shut. The issue isn't your past, I said, turning to face her. It's the lies you wrapped around it. Where are you going? She asked. Not out of worry. Just calculation. Does it matter? I replied. You've already moved on. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out. The days that followed, I lived at the audiobook studio. The soundproof walls were a blessing, kept the noise out, and my thoughts in. The hum of the recording booth, the soft clicks of the console, the steady rhythm of actors breathing life into scripts, it was like stepping into a whole different world. And here, all the chaos of my personal life didn't stand a chance. You look like hell, Sabrina said, setting a hot coffee in front of me. She wasn't one for sugarcoating anything. That's what made her such a good lead engineer and an even better friend. Always with the compliments, I muttered, rubbing the grit out of my eyes. Another night on Derek's couch hadn't done me any favors. How's the Monroe project coming along? Still on schedule, she said, but I could tell something else was coming. She leaned against the doorframe. Lauren called the studio. That made me freeze. What? For times. Yesterday. My jaw clenched. She say what she wanted? To know where you're staying. Said your phone goes straight to voicemail. That's because I turned it off, I said, flipping switches on the board, my way of signaling I was done talking. Let's just stick to work, okay? Sabrina gave me that look, the one that said she wanted to say more, but she didn't push it. That's what I liked about her. She knew when to step back. By noon, I was buried in edits, fine-tuning the tension in a thriller series, cutting breaths, aligning beats. That rhythm, that focus, it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Then the buzzer went off. Strange for a closed session. I got it, I told Sabrina, stretching as I stood up. When I opened the door, I didn't expect to see Mason standing there, looking sheepish. Bad time? He asked. I thought for a second, then stepped aside. Actually, might be perfect. Come on in. We could use another set of ears. He blinked, surprised, then gave a small smile. We both knew he was better than me at this part. Always had a gift for pacing, emphasis, emotion. The moment we sat down at the board, it was like no time had passed. 7 years apart, but we still clicked. Working side by side felt, right? Comfortable. During a break, the studio mostly cleared out, he asked. You still at Derek's? I nodded. For now. Trying to find my own place, but Seattle's a nightmare for rentals. He sipped his coffee. I've got a studio above the garage. Small, quiet. Private. I looked at him. Why? Why help me now? After what happened? He set his mug down. Because Lauren didn't just drive a wedge between us, she wrecked the business too. And I've had 7 years to realize that holding a grudge doesn't get you anything but stress. I studied him for a long moment. He looked older, wiser, like time had finally settled that wild energy of his. I appreciate it, I said. Let me think about it. Later that night, just as I was locking up, my phone buzzed. A text from Lauren's lawyer. Formal request for a meeting to discuss separation terms. It was cold, legal, clinical, but somehow that hit harder than any fight or screaming match. It felt like a death notice, 16 years of life together, reduced to paperwork. The jokes, the plans, the little habits that build a life, now just line items on a spreadsheet. I sat there in my car, staring at that text glowing in the dark. And instead of heading to Derek's, I turned the key and drove toward Mason's place. Because some bridges, I was starting to see, weren't meant to stay burned. His garage apartment wasn't fancy. Tiny kitchen, barely their bathroom, furniture that looked like it had been rescued from a college dorm. But it had two things I desperately needed, privacy and space from Lauren. It's not the Ritz, Mason said, handing me a key. It's perfect, I replied, dropping my suitcase on the floor. Out the window, the mountains loomed in the distance, still dusted with snow. Quiet. Steady. Listen, about the studio, Mason said, hands stuffed in his pockets. No pressure, but if you want to keep working. I've got time. I'm between projects. I looked at him, the guy who'd once been my best friend until Lauren got between us. You serious? He shrugged. Let's call it a trial run. See how it goes. 3 days later, we were buried in a new fantasy series, Swords, Dragons, Destiny, the works. The voice actor, this older guy with a voice like thunder, was nailing every line. Mason and I kept exchanging those little nods through the glass. The rhythm was back. Then my phone buzzed. Another message. Lauren's lawyer. The message was short and sharp. Meeting tomorrow, 2:30 p.m., our offices. Please confirm attendance. Bad news, I muttered under my breath. Mason glanced up, reading my face like a book. Lawyers. I slipped the phone into my pocket. Yeah, tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Without missing a beat, he said, Want me to come with you? Moral support. My first instinct was to say no, like always. Handle it myself. But I caught the words before they came out. I'd spent 16 years thinking doing it alone meant I was strong. But these last few weeks, they taught me something. That letting someone stand beside you doesn't make you weak. It means you're smart enough to know when to lean. Actually, yeah, I said. I'd like that. The next day, we sat across from Lauren and her high-powered attorney in a polished, sterile conference room. Mason was right beside me, calm as ever. My own lawyer, Tina, sharp, all business, was laying it out plain and clear. My client contests Mrs. Whitaker's claim to Whitaker Audio Productions, Tina said, voice steady. The company existed before the marriage. Its growth is tied directly to Mr. Whitaker's expertise and professional relationships. Lauren's attorney leaned in. Mrs. Whitaker provided financial support in the early stages. Those were loans. I jumped in. Loans that were repaid, with interest, by 2009. I slid a file across the table. It's all documented. Lauren's mask cracked just a little. She hadn't expected I'd kept records that detailed. But I'd learned the hard way, after what she did to Mason years ago, not to leave things to chance. Tina picked up from there. My client is also willing to give up any claim to the marital home in return for full control of the business and its assets. It was a tactical trade. Sure, the house was worth more on paper. But the studio? That was my heartbeat. Lauren never saw it that way. To her, it was just another thing to win or lose. We'll need to review these terms, her lawyer said, clearly rattled. After we wrapped up, Lauren caught me by the arm. Her voice dropped low. This vindictive streak doesn't suit you, Gavin. I almost laughed. It's not vindictive to finally stand up for myself. Her eyes narrowed. I made you, you know. That studio wouldn't have lasted a year without me. For a second, I saw something behind the steel front, some fear, maybe. A need to believe she was the reason for everything I'd built. You've told yourself that so long. You believe it, I said, calm and steady. But deep down, you know the truth. And I walked away, Mason at my side. Felt like I'd just dropped a 100-pound weight I'd been dragging for years. The little cafe near the studio had become part of my routine. I'd grab a strong cup of coffee, pick the corner table, and go through production notes before diving into the day. That morning, as I reviewed sound cues, a shadow slid across my table. Mind if I join? It was Sabrina, coffee in hand. I nodded at the empty chair. Of course. She sat and stirred sugar into her cup. So, how's the reunion with Mason going? Honestly, better than I expected, I said. And it was true. Mason and I just clicked back into rhythm like no time had passed. You two always balanced each other, Sabrina said, leaning back. You're all structure and detail. He's more vibes and instinct. Together? Magic. I smiled. She wasn't wrong. Guess I needed to be reminded. She sipped her drink, then said, Derek told me Lauren's getting the house. Of course he did. But I didn't mind Sabrina knowing. After all these years, she felt more like family than most of my relatives. Yeah, I said. It was my call. I gave up the house to keep the business. Sabrina nodded. Smart. Houses come and go. What you've built here, that's one of a kind. Right then, my phone buzzed. I glanced down and froze. It was an email from him. Colin Barrett. Lauren's whatever he was. Subject line. Information you should know. Message. Can we meet today at 1:30? There are things about Lauren you ought to hear. Sabrina caught the shift in my face. What is it? I showed her the message. Her eyebrows lifted. Are you going to meet him? I wasn't sure. Part of me wanted to delete it. Pretend it didn't exist. Block out every last thread connecting me to that twisted mess. But something about it gnawed at me. If there was something I didn't know, something important, I needed to hear it. I think I have to. I'd made up my mind. Even if nothing came of it, I had to see this through and close the chapter for good. At 1:30 p.m. sharp, I sat on a worn bench in a downtown park, watching a flock of pigeons fight over scattered breadcrumbs like they were gold coins. Colin showed up right on time. He looked a little less polished than the last time I'd seen him, back when he was standing in my living room like he owned the place. Thanks for meeting me, he said as he sat beside me. I didn't bother with small talk. Let's skip the pleasantries. What's this about? He looked down at his hands, his shiny watch catching the sunlight. Lauren ended things with me. Said she needs to focus on securing her future. And why do I care? I kept my voice flat. I had zero interest in hearing about my ex-wife's love life. Because she's pulling the same playbook on me that she used on you. He held out his phone and showed me an email. She claimed I pressured her into a relationship and said her job might be at risk if she refused. I stared at him. Is that true? No, he said quickly, and I could tell he meant it. It was mutual. More than mutual. She was the one who initiated things. Now there was an HR investigation. Suddenly, Colin was being blamed, and Lauren was seen as the one who had been wronged. It all sounded very familiar. Mason. That whole mess years ago. Lauren had a way of twisting the truth until it worked for her. Always the victim. Always the wrong party. Why are you telling me this? Because she's setting you up too. He looked me dead in the eye. She told me she is proof you misused company money for the studio. Said she's building a case to claim half the business and the divorce. That cold anger hit me again harder this time. Even with everything over between us, Lauren was still scheming. Still trying to take something that never belonged to her. She won't succeed, I said calmly. I've got every receipt. Bank records. Signed statements. Unlike you, I know who I'm dealing with. Colin looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. I didn't, he admitted quietly. I had no idea. For a split second, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Consider it a painful education, I said, standing. And Colin, next time, choose more wisely. 5 months later, I was standing in the entryway of my new house. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a simple 3-bedroom craftsman with good bones and some of the ugliest wallpaper I'd ever seen. But it was mine. All mine. Last box, Mason said, dropping a crate labeled vintage vinyl in the living room. Ready for the big studio tour? I grinned and grabbed my jacket. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Turned out Colin's little truth bomb had changed everything. Lauren backed off her claims on the business, just like that. She kept the house and walked away with a settlement. I got the studio and something way more valuable, peace of mind. We renamed it Whitaker and Echo Ridge Studios. Mason's idea. With audiobooks and podcasts blowing up, we'd expanded into the space next door. Doubled our size. New booths, a full podcast suite, even a lounge for voice talent. It felt like a fresh start in every sense of the word. Sabrina had taken over hiring. Brought in 2 new engineers straight out of school. Sharp kids. Hungry. It felt good, watching them learn. Not bad for a couple of middle-aged guys starting from scratch, Mason said as we looked around. Speaking of starting over, I said, trying to sound casual. Got a call from that literary agent yesterday. She wants to meet. Said those audio tutorials we made might make a good book. Mason's eyes lit up. You're kidding. That's huge. It was huge. More than I'd ever expected. Proof that the decades I'd poured into this craft actually meant something. And there's something else, I added, my stomach doing this weird nervous flutter. I asked Sabrina to dinner. A real one. Not just another work catch-up. Mason laughed loud and genuine. About time. You know I've been nudging that for months. I laughed too, the sound bouncing off the studio walls. My life at 40 looked nothing like I thought it would. My marriage had crumbled. I'd lost my house. Had to rebuild from the ground up. But standing there, in the place I'd built with my own 2 hands, shoulder to shoulder with a friend who never left, and knowing a woman I truly respected might actually feel the same way about me, I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a better one. Exactly 1 year after everything fell apart, I was back in that same control room. Only this time, I was listening to the final cut of the biggest project we'd ever done, a full-blown audio drama. 17 voice actors. Original score. Sound design so rich you could close your eyes and feel like you were right there. Sabrina sat beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. It's our best work, she said. And she was right. Over the past 5 months, our relationship had grown into something real. Built on trust, respect, and a shared love for the craft. Definitely award-worthy, I said, making a few last notes on the mix. And in that moment, I finally felt it. Closure. And something even better, hope. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. Lauren was spotted at Heathrow. It read, "Looks like Metatronics UK wasn't impressed with how she handled her research. London office shut the position down." I turned the screen towards Sabrina, and she lifted an eyebrow. "Karma's a slow walker," she said. Honestly, I didn't feel any sense of victory over Lauren's downfall, just a distant awareness that choices catch up eventually. Meanwhile, my life had taken a few surprising turns. The book deal with Mason, the growth of our studio, and maybe most unexpectedly, this steady, easy relationship with Sabrina, someone who truly got my passion for sound in a way Lauren never did. Gavin. came a voice over the intercom. Someone's here to see you. I stepped out to reception and saw a young woman, early 20s, standing nervously. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They were familiar. Mr. Whitaker, she asked. I'm Jenna. I think you were married to my birth mother, Lauren Sutton. The ground seemed to tilt under me. One of Lauren's children, the daughter she'd placed for adoption long before I came into the picture. Can I get you some coffee? I asked, finding my voice again. Sounds like we've got a lot to talk about. Over the next hour, Jenna shared her story, how she'd tracked down her birth mother, how Lauren had been cold and distant, and how she just wanted some understanding of where she came from. She didn't want to meet me, Jenna said quietly. But she told me, you might be willing to tell me something. Anything. Even now, Lauren was dodging responsibility, pushing this young woman's questions onto someone else. That part hadn't changed. I'll tell you what I can, I said gently. But I think there's someone else you should talk to, too. My buddy Mason knew pieces of Lauren's past even I didn't. As I called him, I glanced at Jenna's hopeful face, and something clicked. Some of life's hardest chapters opened doors we never saw coming. The silence that used to weigh so heavy on me had now been replaced by new voices, new stories, new beginnings. Sometimes, losing everything is what makes room for exactly what you needed all along. Bye.